Chapter 14. Imogen didn't waste time. When she returned to the cabin that evening, she packed a duffel bag and Cookie's things. Her dog loved road trips, and she didn't want to be without her even for a few days. The next morning, she loaded up the car and waved goodbye to her aunt, who was waving from the porch as they headed out of town. She knew Aunt Jo was probably looking forward to having her privacy back, even temporarily. For Imogen's part, she had texted her dad and a few friends to let them know her plans. The drive was quick, less than 5 hours, which was spent listening to her favorite playlist and singing at the top of her lungs. It had been a while since she'd spent a long time in the car, and while she didn't want to make it a regular occurrence, it was funny how the 25-minute drive to town from the cabin had become a quick trip in her mind. Once she crossed over into New York State, the traffic quickly tripled. By the time she made it off the thruway and onto the Garden State Parkway, she was doing all she could to keep up with the cars racing past her, easily going 20 miles over the limit. It had been just over 4 months since she made this drive in the opposite direction for the first time. Things had changed so much for her in that short span. Thankfully, a lifetime of dodging traffic made for great muscle memory, and before she knew it, they'd pulled off the highway and took the back roads to her beautiful beach town. By the time she'd pulled into her apartment's parking spot, she had tentative plans for dinner and drinks with several people over the next couple of days. At least the ones not covered in diapers and going to mommy and me groups. She smiled. She was getting excited to get to hit all her favorite spots while she was here. Asbury Park was an incredible place to grow up, wonderfully diverse. It did, however, hold a clear line between gentrified areas closer to the ocean and lesser-income families on the west side. She drove through both, making her way to her apartment building that was within walking distance of the boardwalk in the downtown area. Imogen had chosen the complex because she loved to walk, and the entire town was dog-friendly, with everything from dog beaches to beach bars where dogs were welcomed. More than being dog-friendly, the town boasted a variety of artists, musicians, and high-quality restaurants. There had been a big move by urban liberals into the area a few decades prior, making it feel like the coastal version of Greenwich Village in New York City. As a result, it had a beautifully edgy, artistic beach vibe. Imogen had loved growing up here, especially during the off-season when tourists were few and far between. "We'll go stretch our legs soon, Cookie, but I have to get a little organized first. We have lots to do in a small amount of time." Imogen led the way into the apartment, dropping her duffel on the velvet couch. Her pit bull woofed in agreement, taking the opportunity to wander the apartment and make sure it passed the sniff test. Her apartment was a sharp contrast to the rustic feel of Joe's and Gabe's homes. The vibe in here was all vibrant color, black and white photography she'd taken herself, and industrial appliances. It was a sleek and modern bohemian feel that suited her. Imogen loved the space. It had been the first apartment she hadn't shared with a roommate, and it reflected her personality. Bold, warm, and slightly edgy. She sat on the couch, looking around. She'd been gone for months. The air was stale, and Imogen felt like she was so different from when she'd left in September. She'd stepped completely out of her comfort zone, working on a farm, had fallen in love for the first time, and finally found her mission in life, to help abandoned or abused animals. With a deep sigh, she decided to just start packing up her things and reward herself with a cocktail and dinner at one of her favorite oceanfront restaurants. On the way home, she'd called the local U-Haul and ordered boxes, tape, and packing popcorn to be delivered so she was ready to start. There was a lot to do and not a lot of time to make it happen. Imogen had farm work waiting for her, another meeting with her lawyer, and, frankly, she didn't want to be away from Gabe longer than she had to be. A few hours later, Imogen was interrupted by a knock on her door. That was strange. While she was friendly with the neighbors, she wasn't used to people just popping in for a visit. She glanced at her watch and saw that it was already late afternoon. Imogen looked around at the chaos everywhere, then down at herself. Her ratty t-shirt and sweatpants were covered in dust, and her hair was thrown haphazardly into a bun. She was not company ready, but so be it. Her guest was lucky she was wearing a bra. She picked her way through the debris on the floor and answered the door with a flourish, happy to see who stood on the other side. "Dad!" "Hey, kiddo." Sebastian Gray steeled himself as his daughter launched herself at him. It's great to see you. Thought I'd stop by and see if you need a hand." Sebastian, or Seb as his friends and family called him, grinned as he looked into his only daughter's apartment. They'd always been close. Imogen and her mother had always seemed in opposition, but he was easygoing by nature, except when it came to business. Then he was a shark. He and his daughter had a lot in common that way. Imogen would take all the help she could get. She wasn't about to turn down an offer of assistance. Her dad was dressed more for dinner, in a blue pullover, khaki slacks, and a wool jacket, but she figured it would have to do. She'd overestimated how much stuff she'd accumulated over the years. There was definitely going to be a visit to the Goodwill on her way out of town. "I definitely need a hand," she admitted. "But on one condition, I get to take you to dinner afterward." "Deal." Seb made his way carefully into the room and laid his coat neatly on the kitchen chair as he looked around at the chaos. "First thing, is there any organization here?" Imogen laughed. Although she and her father were a lot alike, she tended to be quite a bit messier. His decades of living with her mother had browbeaten orderliness into his routine. She'd started on the kitchen, she wasn't much of a cook, and it was the least cluttered room in the entire place. Everything in the room was spewed haphazardly on the counter of the small galley kitchen, with no rhyme or reason to it. With her dad's help, the contents of that room and the living room were soon neatly boxed and labeled. Many of the items were going to a self-storage area in nearby Rutland until Imogen was able to get settled in her own place in Vermont. The uncertainty gave her anxiety, but she was doing the best she could with what was available to her. While she had money in savings and a trust fund from her parents she'd never touched, she was by no means wealthy. The last few months she'd lived off Joe's meager income from the farm. That wasn't a long-term solution. Her independence assured that. She wanted to be independent in every way. Imogen and her dad sat on her couch in matching poses, lolling back against the cushions like they didn't have any bones in their bodies. Their sleeves were rolled up and exhaustion seeped through their pores. At some point, Cookie had decided to make a bed of the packing peanuts and lay sprawled amongst them on her back, all 4 legs in the air. She was ridiculously cute. "I might be too tired to go to dinner," Imogen admitted reluctantly. Seb turned to his daughter, the lines of exhaustion clear on his face. "We could order in, but if we go out, we can get spicy margaritas." She grinned. "Sold." He always knew how to light a fire under her. Like that was hard. He laughed, knowing how to best influence his only child. Imogen looked down at herself. "First, I'm going to take a quick shower. Want to head over and grab us a seat at the bar?" They had always enjoyed sitting at the bar at their local haunts. Not only was it easier during busy season, but they knew the bartenders at all their favorite restaurants, and they were quite generous. Plus, both were social people and enjoyed speaking with old and new friends alike. You got it. Probably best to clean up the packing peanuts, though, before we go, so Cookie doesn't accidentally ingest them. They looked over at the dog, who hadn't moved a muscle, her light snores making her upside-down jowls shiver. "You're probably right. Let's do that first, then I'll freshen up and we'll have that drink. I think we've earned it."